Welcome to the Building People Show with AJ Keilty. This week, AJ talks to Paul Finkbeiner, president of GWL Realty Advisors, about his personal background and what it means to be a leader in business.
Well, welcome to episode number 3 of the Building People Show. Super excited to have Paul Finkbeiner here, GWL Realty Advisors. Just a little bit of background, because I think it's more people understand. It's important to know, the companies that we're working with. This firm is a true leader in the industry, looking at $17 million in assets, 276 buildings, I think it is right now, all together.
It's a lot.
Across the province, mostly in Canada.
Oh, it's all across Canada, yeah.
All asset classes, the major ones: office, retail, industrial, and multi-res.
Multi-res, yeah.
It's a pretty amazing thing that you've built.
Pretty cool.
From 22 years now?
Yeah, it's 20 years, 22, but we started with 800 million in assets and we're 17 billion. So that's something I'm very proud of. The other thing I'd say that during that time, one of the things that you look back on is the returns on the assets were roughly 10% per annum. So
it's substantial. It's
so not saying, had you given us your money, you might have done a whole lot better in the stock market. Yeah. But a 10% return compounded for 20 years is pretty impressive.
It's a phenomenal achievement.
Delivering on returns to me always leads to growth. And growth makes a company fun for people. Because if you're growing, you're having fun.
People feel good?
Yeah.
So we first connected when I learned that you were a rugby player at Queen's University, like I was.
Yeah.
And that was a kind of neat connection, because it's a special place to go to school. But a lot of our audience, the Building People Show, are young folks at that age playing rugby potentially, or other sports.
Yeah.
I'd love if you could tell us how your real estate story started. Where did you begin?
Oh, well, one thing I thought I'd point out is that I had so I went to Queen's, and I had 2 degrees at Queen's, an engineering degree and a master's in engineering. And then I went on to do an MBA at McGill. One of my old civil engineering profs phoned me up one time and he said, what helped you with your career, your MBA or your engineering? I said, I think it was actually playing rugby. I said, playing rugby allowed me to understand teamwork, helping one another out, that you're only as good as your team and not yourself as an individual. So I thought that's a nice piece of information. It's the truth. I mean, a lot of times I look back to a difficult decision is one as follows. You're on a team of 20 guys. Yeah. Only 15 get to play. And you're part of the selection committee that decides one of your friends isn't playing. That's a whole lot harder than laying somebody off because you ran out of work. But how I got into real estate was a little bit by chance, but by thought too. I had done my education, so I did my engineering degree, I did a master's in engineering, worked for a couple years as an engineer, did an MBA, and started with the Royal Bank, because the Royal Bank recruited on campus. And the bank and I didn't agree. So we parted company, and then it was, what are you going to do next? I think I was about to get married, and it was, okay, sit back, you have an engineering degree and MBA, how do you combine them? So I looked at 2 areas. One was engineering sales, and the other one was real estate. And I chose to go the real estate route. I was recruited to work for a shopping center company called Tri-Lee. We officed out of Yorkdale. And once I landed there, I found it was something I liked. Mm-hmm. And I had tried engineering and I had tried banking, and then all of a sudden I get to an industry I like. And so that's where I started, and it was a pretty sizable shopping center company. Mm-hmm. Yorkdale, Scarborough Town were our biggest shopping centers. And I didn't envision that Yorkdale would be what it is today.
Now. It's
pretty impressive, yeah.
So you talked about a recruiter helping you to get in your first feet into the industry. Is that something you recommend now as well, or is that different?
Well, no, I think if you're able to get a little bit of experience and understand it, even if to me, if you're somebody trying to get in the industry and you've flipped houses or you've renovated a house, I think that's an indication that you like the business. Mm-hmm. From my standpoint, it was more by luck. Mm-hmm. I was looking in 2 areas. It just so happened that I knew a recruiter that had the job, and that's how I got the job. But I was starting to target them. Like I still remember going in to see somebody at the previous company to Brookfield with a resume, and they met me. And there were 2 people I met, and I still think highly of them because they allowed me to cold call, meet the receptionist, walk in and talk to somebody. And years later, I ended up working for Brookfield. But for somebody trying to figure out their route, it's trying to see if you can get a taste of it, to see if you like it. And I would recommend that no matter what business you're trying to get in. Try it. You need to try things to find out you don't like them. So I knew I didn't really want to be an engineer, and I knew I didn't really want to be a banker. But when I got into real estate, I liked it, and there were difficult times, but I was like, okay, I've gone to school for this long, I've tried 2 things, I'm sticking with this one even though it's bad. I'm going to hang in there. I mean, that's kind of how I looked at it.
Funny, my first job was with Procter & Gamble.
Yeah.
And I had a similar situation where I didn't see eye to eye with a big company.
I
was in the tampon business.
Yeah.
Fascinating experience, learned a lot, but it's making those pivots was key.
Well, you would appreciate the comment a guy made to me at the bank. So he goes, at the bank and an account manager, we're like cheerleaders. And I almost said, I am not a cheerleader. I'm a player, okay? Yeah. I want to play in the game. I don't want to. He goes, well, what we do is we support the company and we watch them grow. And I go, yeah. So as soon as he said it, he thought he was
interesting.
He thought he was making getting me excited about it. And meanwhile, he's turning me off. So
when you eventually did come to this firm, GWL, what was your first job here?
My first job was so we're at that time. 2 of us are coming from Trizec, a guy by the name of Paul Kennedy and myself. And Paul and I had gone through a lot at Trizec. Trizec was being restructured. So we got here and he said, there's a fund called the Canadian Real Estate Investment Fund #1. It's a $200 million fund, and I want you to be the first portfolio manager for that fund.
What an opportunity.
I said, okay.
Wow.
What does that mean? He goes, I don't know, because we've never had a portfolio manager. And so my thing was, this is a vehicle, and it had a bunch of small real estate in it, and I thought, okay, I've got to come up with a business plan for it. I've got to figure out what the returns are going to be. And in those early days, because no one was focused on the fund, it was just kind of sold as an add-on. No one had an overview of it. So my job was to take that, understand it and dissect it, analyze it, look at the properties, decide which ones we should keep, which ones we should sell, and then where you wanted to go with it, and then try and raise money. So early days it was very difficult, but it was the first time anyone had been focused on it. And I have to say that, even when I went out to pitch it, I was trying to get the numbers all added up, and I said, does anyone have an idea what the return of the fund is going to be this year? Not really. I said, well, how can I go and sell it to somebody? And I know you're not allowed to make forward-looking statements, but how can I sell it to somebody if I don't know what the returns are? So we waited a while, and then eventually the machine got working, and we were able to look at the real estate, to decide what we should keep. We went to the newspapers and talked about our business plan, about how we were going to sell smaller assets and buy bigger ones. And then we started to grow that fund, and that fund today is, I think it's $4 to $5 billion.
Wow.
That fund. And what I have to tell you too is that the success of our company is also related to Great West Life's distribution system. So we have insurance sales guys and people that sell our product through distribution, and therefore we get money in. But it was, if you take that fund and you look at it, in my opinion, it's better than most of the publicly traded companies. The real estate companies in Canada today. The quality of the real estate's phenomenal, and we now have 3 funds: a Great West Life Fund, a Canada Life Fund, and a London Life Fund. Yeah. So it was all good.
It's pretty remarkable to see what's been built, and it's the consistency of high quality every time, which really blows my mind.
Yeah.
So that was a great first start into a role. You've been an entrepreneurial role, it sounds like. At the
beginning. Yeah.
What do you think was the reason why you were chosen to run the show, to become president?
Well, at first I had I had great mentors. I don't believe in one mentor because I want to be my own person. And so I stole little things from various people. And I guess my opinion on that is I go back to my athletic days, even in high school. I was almost always selected as the captain or chosen by my peers as the captain. So I believe in leadership. I'm comfortable standing on my own. I am comfortable being the one who takes the hit. So, because in the spirit of in athletics, it should be the captain's fault. The captain should be responsible for the team. So I was comfortable with that, and I think that came through. And so my boss at the time, Paul Kennedy, who is a dear friend, it was almost like a natural that it was going to be me. And I even said to him at different points, if you're not going to get out of the way, let me go someplace else because I want to run something. Yeah. I knew it, and I knew it from an early age. And that said, being a leader is a huge responsibility that you have to carry, and you're always in the spotlight, and people are always looking to you. I'm comfortable doing that, and I have been comfortable since probably age about 13 or 14.
And it's not something that a lot of folks are comfortable with. No. That's what I think is so fascinating. The more and more I speak to leaders of any firm, it's a rare breed that actually want to take on that everything is my fault. Yes. And everything that's great is your success. And it's so rare that people can be that humility.
Well, and when you describe the job to somebody, so somebody, I think it's great that people look to take the next step. And then you explained it almost exactly how I do. I say, okay, you want my job. So my job is to do all the bad things. That's the job. If you take the good things away from your employees or your peers, or somebody who works for you, if you take that away, they won't want to work for you. So when you then describe it that way, my view of the role of the leader is to take on all the bad stuff and let all the good stuff go to others. A lot of people go, I don't know if I want that. It's not. Yeah.
I find it interesting too, when I speak with my team, they sometimes have difficulty letting me take on the bad stuff because they want to protect the person they care about. But it's the best thing we could do is be the guy that takes the bad stuff. It's just the best thing.
Well, and this goes back to, I've been asking for something for over probably about 12 to 15 years. Bad news fast. And it comes from Bill Gates. I want the bad news. And no matter, AJ, no matter how much you ask for the bad news, you don't always get it.
It's so
Even
true.
when you say, give me the bad news. Because I think of a Seinfeld episode is that if it's good news, it's just around. Like I don't need to do anything with it. If it's bad news, I want to focus on it. I do not want to find blame. I want to solve the problem, and then I want to do a postmortem in a very logical way. Again, no finding blame. It's a little bit like in the game of football. If somebody fumbles the ball, you don't need to tell them they fumbled the ball. They know. Yeah. So what you have to do is you have to go into the huddle and say, how are we going to get it back? How are we going to get a touchdown? And then the person didn't want to fumble the ball, so you don't even need to go in the sidelines and say, why did you fumble the ball? If somebody runs a bad pattern, you might say, I don't know why you went there. But what you want to do is you want to solve problems, and that's leadership.
So, as a leader of a firm, your day is pulled, I'm sure, in many different directions. I'm so curious to know how you divvy up your day. What do you spend most of your time on? What does the day look like for you?
I've always wanted to be more focused on the next 5 to 10 years than the day-to-day. And I have a great chief operating officer. His name's Ralph Doss, and we kind of divide it up. He's Mr. Inside and I'm Mr. Outside. So outside means I'm trying to think of the next 5 or 10 years. I'm trying to look at deals. I'm trying to be involved in the industry. I'm doing interviews.
Yes, absolutely.
Those things. I'm the face of the company. He's Mr. Inside. And so what I'm wanting to do is to either be promoting the company or trying to figure out how we're going to make more money, and also looking at the future growth. So right now for us, we're largely a made in Canada company. We want to expand into the U.S. and we want to expand into the U.K. I want to be working on those things, and currently I am working on those things. Occasionally you get sucked into the day-to-day, and that's part of your job. So even if you decide you're Mr. Outside, you're still Mr. Inside. But what I would recommend to a lot of people too, as they start to develop into leaders, they want to be able to surround themselves with good people that complement their skill. And Ralph's a good example, but I have others that make me look good. And what I find is then you have to know how to use them, and you also have to look at what you're good at. And like I'm not a great detail guy, so I don't pretend to read partnership agreements or leases. That's not my forte. But if you want me to go and try and get $500 million from somebody to be our client, I'm good for that.
We all have a role to play.
You got it.
No one can do everything. It's so true.
Yeah.
So you talked about trying to see the future. I believe in that 100%. It's a similar story actually at our firm.
Yeah.
Michael Trindota is my chief operating officer, and we're an amazing pair because he's very operational. He really is trying to make the business run.
Yeah.
And I'm doing the same thing you are. And so it's interesting to hear that the importance of finding those pairs early in your career to work with.
And that they're content doing it.
Yeah.
So then you're not competing for limelight or
It's a team.
Yeah.
So thinking about the future, that's obviously the biggest piece of your role. Where are you learning? Where are you seeing the future? How are you crafting that vision? Where do you spend your time?
What many years ago? So I'm now. I was in YPO, Young Presidents Organization, and through Young Presidents Organization, which was 1999, I ended up having a forum group of 10 to 12 guys, all presidents from different walks of life. I learn a lot from them. I learn more from other things and watching other industries. That group, we're still together. We're not 12 anymore. We might be down to 6. But I learned from somebody who's running private equity. I learned from somebody who's running or dealing with the financial services sector. Learning in real estate, you kind of run out of opportunity there. It's just that you've seen it before, and from my standpoint, I went through probably one of the worst downturns in real estate in '89 to '90 than anyone's seen. So I've got a fairly good set of real estate tools. But what I like to be is in tune with other asset classes, like what are bonds doing, what are equities doing, and what are other leaders doing to run their companies. I've reflected on something Ed Clark said to me over lunch one time. He said, it was 2008, and the bank was going, everyone was there was a financial crisis. And he was making comments about his people. He said, well, we can't fire all these people. We'll live again. And what we have to do is we also have all this succession planning and all this training in place. We have to be thoughtful about what we do. And those are things that, you then take that from somebody else and you look at what's going on in other industries. Like, I think it's fascinating to watch what's going on with Uber and Airbnb, just in terms of, can that affect the real estate business? Is there something that's disruptive that means people do not want to be in office buildings anymore? Do they not want to be in apartment buildings anymore? I don't think it's likely. But when you wake up one day and you say, even I don't know if lately it's been interesting on TV, Gillette is under fire. So finally, all those expensive razor blades that we have bought are under fire because the Dollar Shave Club is kicking their butt. Gillette is finally dropping prices for the first time. I love watching stuff like that. I love paying attention to, what could happen. When you wake up and you want to be, you don't want to be surprised.
Yes, it's so true.
Yeah.
You spoke briefly about mentors a few minutes ago, and you just bring them at Clark. Mentors are incredibly important, and we talk all the time with our audience about how to find mentors and build with them.
Yeah.
The mentors that you remember, the ones that you've spent time with, who are they, and what are the big lessons you've taken away from them?
There was multiple. So Paul Kennedy, I worked for a number of years. I have a dear friend, Archie Roberts, who I worked with at Trizec, and he was one who got me into YPO. I'd add Michael Latimer, who's now running OMERS. I even think of my father. So what I looked at each one is I looked at my skills and who I was, and I looked at which parts of them fit for what worked for me. And when I think about a few things, is just that, even one of the things Paul said to me, if you don't keep track of my holidays, I won't keep track of yours, right? Things like that. Even Latimer had said to me at one point, control your own schedule. So, as an example, somebody says, can we meet at 6 o'clock? And you're thinking, well, I don't really like getting up at 6 o'clock, but you say yes.
Yeah.
That's not being intelligent.
Yes.
And if you just say, well, 8 works better. And so and over time, even Archie did something that I thought was brilliant. So we're in a room full of people, and we want to take this company we're working with, and we want to go into every state in the U.S. And
ambitious.
Yes. So this accountant gets up. His name's Stanley Long. I still remember it like it's yesterday. And Stanley goes, you can't do this, and you can't do that, and you can't do this, and you can't do that. And Archie calmly said, Stanley, you're an extremely bright guy, and you have found reasons not to do this, and I'm positive you're going to find reasons that we can do this, because we are. And it was brilliant, right? He just turned it around, and then said, I am challenging you to solve a problem. So there, and even in that, like I even think of some of the captains that I had and people that that I just grew up with. Mm-hmm. How in some ways, even though we were peers, there were things that they did and that we needed to do support one mm-hmm. another. It was very important. So I'm like, from my standpoint, I find that you take it from a lot of places, mm-hmm. and the formalization of leader or mentors, I don't know if you have to do it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I think it's too forced. Mm-hmm. To me, this should be more of a natural thing, particularly you are trying to be the leader you should be, not the leader somebody else is. And I will tell you that I am not like any of those names I mentioned. I'm my own leader, and I think that's important for people to figure out. What their own leadership style they should develop, but they can take pieces from others.
I have a confession to make. When I, about a decade ago, came across a company called Vertica Resident Services, I read through the website
yep.
and turned around to my team and said, this is exactly what we need to base our company on, this model of resident services.
Yeah.
Because it was not happening anywhere else in Canada. Maybe a drop in the States, but
yeah.
nothing in Canada. And when I came across this, I just said, we got to copy this all. We guess this is our inspiration for the next 10 years.
Yeah.
I'm so curious as to, that brand was a wholly separate brand,
yep.
different from GWL. What was the catalyst to do that as a separate brand and to create that totally new way of looking at multi-res management?
Coming into, I was an office or a retail guy prior, and coming into the multi-res space, you suddenly realize it was a lot different sell mm-hmm. on convincing someone this is your space. Mm-hmm. So we believed at the time that it required a different type of management. Mm-hmm. And so, and we, I still remember early days, we were looking more at US models, because in US models they had a ton of vacancies, so suddenly you actually had to provide service. Yeah. And so there was a very good friend of mine who worked for me, Mitch Abrahams, and Mitch and I talked about what it should look like. Mm-hmm. And he went around the US saying, here's what we're seeing, and here's how we want to do it. It was a vision, and it's been, I would be honest, it's been harder to get it the way we want it than I thought. I thought this was going to be dead easy. Mm-hmm. But we're still having difficulty trying to get that level of service mm-hmm. In those properties compared to commercial. Mm-hmm. But the vision was that you should have a professional leasing person. You should have mm-hmm. a professional manager rather than the couple model. Mm-hmm. And we still believe that, but in some cases I think we go to a hybrid. And in some cases the couple model does work. Mm-hmm. But it was something, we believed in. We thought we could turn Canada on its ear. And I wouldn't say that it has, but I think it was a great company to set up to give it a try.
Well, you definitely spawned
yes.
Varsity into what it is just
yeah.
from that inspiration. Yeah. I truly believe that that's just a great platform that you build.
Yeah.
It's really fantastic. So I read once that you take risks, but you don't take chances.
Yes.
And I thought that was just the most wonderful phrase for a leader to bring up. But it got me wondering, how do you test and go about deciding the difference between a risk and a chance?
There's usually analysis involved. It's not like a chance is what the hell. Like let's just do that. In a lot of cases, what you want to make sure is that you've looked at the downside, you've done some analysis, but you still, what I believe is important in real estate is to still have some sort of gut feel.
Yeah.
I don't want it to be all analytical. And so to me the difference is, and I remember this more from a Calgary perspective. One of our clients, through another advisor, was going to build a building on spec. So I got a phone call from a reporter saying, well, this is crazy. And I said, well, no, I don't think it's that crazy. There hasn't been a new building built for 10 years. The market supports new construction. They're going to be the first out of the ground, so that seems like calculated risk, not a chance. And so that's an example of it where I think you're taking a chance is if you've seen 4 buildings go up and you really want to go and they're not leasing up well, that's taking a chance. And that's what I would see the difference. And a lot of these phrases that I got there was a book that I read a long time ago called If Ain't Broke, Break It. And it gave you pause to just make sure you're thinking about things like the comment, it's not in the budget. Like that to me is a ridiculous comment. Because the roof caved in, the shopping center's in trouble, but it's not in the budget, we can't. So no, and this is where a lot of the stuff, I always look at more from a practical standpoint. Here we are, we have a problem, a tenant is angry at you, solve the problem, don't go to the manual. And there's those types of things, and that's kind of where taking risks and not chances is one of those more thoughtful ways of looking at it.
That's brilliant.
Yeah,
It makes so much sense.
Yeah.
When we made our leap out of our hometown of Kingston to our next city,
Yes.
I was pretty scared.
You got it.
Like it's a huge thing to go from 1 to 2, and we've since grown then. But
Yep.
I was fortunate enough to go and literally ask Alf Henry over at Homestead, Alf, how do you do this? Like, how do you manage like a whole slew of properties and people from a long ways away?
Yeah.
And he said, I just hire great people. And
Locally.
That's just the way he.
Yeah.
But that's one step. Once you've got great people, you still have to keep it connected somehow. How are you finding your success and in building a team of people that learn together and stay connected? Because everything I see from the outside, your team is outstanding. And they're trained extremely well.
Yeah.
How are you doing that as a wide, diffused team across the country? How do you manage to do that?
The thing that, so real estate's a local business. That was identified to me a long time ago when I was working at Brookfield at the time, working in a combination of Trizec and Brookfield, and Bain came in to do a consulting thing on us. And so they almost identified that if you're strong locally, your returns are higher. So like they gave an example where we owned, I think, 5 buildings in one market and 1 building in another. The returns on this were much better because we knew the market. So what I find is what makes for good success is first you need good local people on the ground. The next thing is they still have to feel connected. So we have weekly calls. And what I want to make sure is that everyone on the executive team connects on a weekly call to make sure everyone knows what's going on. The next thing is that we have regular executive get-togethers where we do them in person. We do some by phone. But all the time talking about where we want to go as a company, because when you are a decentralized business, there still has to be a reason to get together. And because of my upbringing both at Brookfield and Trizec, we were always dealing with these different regions. So what does solving something in California have to do with solving something in Toronto? Well, you'd be surprised. Sometimes it's actually the same tenant you're negotiating with, and there is learning. And so the thing is, even though you get into its local business, I think you're still better to be centralized at the top and sharing ideas and growth ideas at a national level or a global level. And I know that there are still some, I don't want to call them synergies, but there is a need to be part of a global thing, and you'd be surprised when you actually talk about how that happens. And I see that a little bit in our business. We have an office in Dublin and one in London, and we talk monthly. Well, occasionally what you find out is cap rates are pretty much the same. You start to see where the flow of capital is coming, and you then say, okay, well, they're here too. Who are you dealing with? And so there's always a little bit of learning that happens when you get together, and you just have to create mechanisms. And this weekly call of mine I've been doing for over 15 years. Every week we get on the call, and we everybody's at a certain level and up, we talk about what's going on, and that helps us stay connected. But because otherwise you would have a local business that wouldn't, and that to me is a little bit of a problem. You want them, you as you grow into a region, you want to have its own identity, but you want it to be part of something bigger.
Beautiful.
So it's.
So we want to get back to you, giving us
Sure.
some of your time. The last question always goes to our guests. And so you got an audience of people, young folks. You can ask them anything you want. They'll answer you in the comments of this video.
Oh, okay.
And we'll send it off to you, and you can take the feedback. What is a question you have for the Building People audience that we talked about earlier?
Wow. I get to ask a question.
Yeah.
That's not, I guess I'm curious more, I can remember what I was like at 18 and 20. I do remember that. And I'm curious on what's important to them in a company and in a career. Because after a while, I kind of concluded it was as much about having fun than anything. Because and I just didn't know where people are at today. So if I was asking people what are they looking for, in an opportunity and in a career.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
We'll get you some answers.
Cheers.
Thank you so much, Paul.
That was fantastic.
Really appreciate it.
Thanks.
And that was the Building People Show. Thanks so much for checking us out. Click subscribe if you want more videos like this.